Welcome back to the Stark Lane podcast. Today we're talking with someone I've known for nearly 20 years. I first met Katy O'Connor when she was the CHRO for a multi-hospital health system in the Pacific Northwest. Katy is a unique individual. She comes from a background in retail. She was in service operations and she bought for Nordstrom's at the beginning of her career. Since then, she's been the top HR executive for integrated delivery systems on the provider side of American healthcare. She's worked on the payer side of American healthcare. She's been in banking and finance. She's also been the top HR executive for one of the largest commercial real estate brokerages on planet Earth. Today, she's a division level CHRO for one of the largest integrated delivery networks in the United States. So I'm absolutely delighted to bring her to the podcast today because I'm quite confident that all of us will take something valuable from this conversation. Let's get to it.
You are now listening to the Stark Lane podcast.
I love the whole state of Texas. Yeah, we're going. If you're up there or close anywhere, like I'm going to tour him around the whole area. We might even go down to San Antonio because, I always wanted to move to Bernie, Texas is my favorite place in the world.
Well, George Strait's there. Bernie has a Lambo dealership now. No kidding. I swear I'm not kidding.
Well, it's grown so much. When I first discovered it like 20 some years ago, it would have been ideal, and it's exploded, and they have, anyway, I digress. Let's get to it. But I love that part of the hill country. It's not like Dallas. You're still close to go to Austin. And
yes. And my daughter is there. She's at the University of Texas, so she gets to enjoy all that every day, every week.
That's awesome.
And that's actually a really good segue, because my first question for everyone is, okay, so who are you? What do you do now? And how did you get there? Right. And you are not the traditional hospital person, because normally people go to work at HR in a hospital and then they, get a bigger job in the hospital, and then they become the HR person over their hospital and maybe over their larger organization or within the organization. You have done it all.
Well, it was rather accidental. The accidental HR person, because I started in high school through a career program with Nordstrom, and I ended up being there for 10 years through college. And so I did everything there, climbed the ladder. They really had a philosophy of promoting from within. So sales to buying, and then kind of fell in backwards to training and development. And that's when I realized, I really like this. And that started my HR career. And so I was in retail for quite some time and had other opportunities just in different industries from there. So I was able to go to telecom and work in organizational development and across the country do some mergers and acquisitions. I went from there, was recruited to grocery and warehousing, transportation, and got introduced to unionized workforces and manufacturing. And so was able to do that for about 10 years. And from there had headhunter calling me for positions in healthcare. And after a lot of back and forth, ended up in healthcare and several other stops along the way that were all accidental again, whether there was a change in direction of ownership with an organization. And just like many people of your listeners, while you're planning out things, life happens a different way. Mm-hmm. So been in those positions where a company sold, you had to find something else, a company downsized. And so you make different moves. And what was really cool about it all was that throughout that, even though it wouldn't have been my choice, I was able to learn so much about different industries, from insurance and banking to maritime and logistics across the world, commercial real estate. And, back when I started out, that would have been considered a job hopper.
Hmm.
And it's really much more the norm today. And being that I had those opportunities in different industries, I think it really helps some of the shared services type roles like finance, HR, marketing, because you learn different businesses, but you know what? The people things, even in an AI world, are always going to apply about relationship building and how to maximize results through people.
Absolutely. And that was going to be my follow-up question is, that multi-industry experience, is that, in today's extremely competitive American healthcare environment, is that a help or a hindrance? But I think we already know the answer to that.
Well, and a great thing, my passion, I started at Nordstrom in this program in high school called DECA, Distributive Education Clubs of America. And so some people may know what that is. It's in high schools and colleges, and you really get a look at careers that you may be interested in, and then you go intern and do that. And my philosophy in HR has always been I want to pay that forward, and I just enjoy talking to students. So I work with Gonzaga University right now and do some volunteering there. And I'm on the Health Sciences Advisory Board in Spokane, Washington. And also just the fun part I love is the pay it forward and telling college students that are interested in human resource careers, boy, if you are able to do a double major with finance or econ or even a minor, it just gives you so much more business savvy and credibility on the people part, but you know what you need to do to achieve the results in the numbers. So that's been, to your point, for people interested in coming up. I really love mentoring youth and paying it forward from the people that helped me do the same.
I can't imagine coming up in HR right now. I don't know if it would be easier or harder. I think harder because a lot of the people coming out of schools, they were in school during COVID. They aren't accustomed to a lot of that face-to-face people interaction, but they have also learned how to leverage AI, leverage technology to become like a force multiplier in a single body of one, but they may not necessarily have the human skills that you and I possess, from coming up where you actually have to go talk to that person, right? So are you seeing any of this in some of the students you're mentoring or the up and comers in your workforce?
Absolutely. And one thing that really came about in my current organization is it feels like it was a massive social experiment for those 4 years where we really did a heavy amount of work from home, and new candidates and college students were coming into the workforce right then. And our CEO and COO have noted that they think losing that interaction time period, that our younger candidates, I hate to generalize, and it's not true all the time, but they just don't sometimes have the same social skills or used to getting in a room and meeting and how to follow up appropriately. And they don't want to sometimes. They want to keep that 100% remote ability. So we really are trying to do the hybrid, most of the time in the office and get back to how to work together. And along with that, the workforce also just got used to back to back to back meetings. So you're not walking in the halls and you're not talking to people and kind of that informal working things out that we all came up with. So we're trying to work towards that and more human interaction. At the same time, there's so many great tools in AI. For someone of my generation, I'm catching up, learning everything I can use it for, the mundane tasks. But the irony of it is it gives us more time to have that personal interaction. And that's what I really love about the ability with the different tools with Copilot and AI.
I love it too. I've had so much fun learning how to leverage myself to do more on a daily basis. But I will be here in my studio, like locked away for a week. And I've learned that a lot of those social skills, I think they're perishable because I'll even walk into a restaurant these days and my skin crawls a little bit when there are people everywhere. But I'm an introvert by nature, so maybe justified.
It's true. And so you have to unlearn that and get out of that mode. And I think it's healthy. I also at the same time think when financials are tight and you don't have as many niceties to invest in for sending people to conferences, what do you do for engagement? Important to do things in person, but if you can be a little flexible and have a day or two a week work from home so people can meet their furnace guy or whatever it may be, that's highly appreciated by employees. So maybe it's being reasonable with the expectations and being a little flexible.
It's hard to develop an ideal workforce and at the same time keep everyone because everyone's fighting for the same talent. And yeah, you want people there. You want them in the office. You want them engaging because you need this because if you're going to be a good executive, you need to learn how to do all this. But then they're like, well, I really don't want to drive an hour and a half to the office, an hour and a half for 15 miles, in traffic when I could be on the phone, knocking out things that are productive or whatever the case may be. It's a catch-22 because they can go across the street to someone else who will pay them $1 more an hour to leverage those skills that you gave them.
Absolutely. And what we have to figure out is, like I mentioned earlier, if you're going to be in back-to-back meetings with your door shut, then you're not getting people interaction. So maybe we need to build in buffer spaces and intentional in-person meetings. Or why do we have all this real estate of offices that is a huge expense to go into your cubicle and shut the door and be on video? So you really have to be intentional about it and kind of relearn what we used to have.
So you personally, I know you've worked in private equity sponsored environments. You've worked in not-for-profit. You've worked public. You've been public? Yeah.
Yep.
Public as well. And see, in all of those, even the not-for-profit these days, especially in healthcare, like that doesn't mean you can spend whatever you want when you want. I mean, money's always tight, right? And especially in HR, when a lot of companies in a lot of industries still view HR, I don't want to say a cost center because a lot of times you are a strategic partner with operations in every function. But still, I mean, you've got to do a lot with a little. And how do you coach and teach people in that environment where you do have such a small margin for error and not a lot of resources to throw around?
Oh my gosh. It's been the story of my career because I think back 20 to 30 years ago when the lingo was HR should have a seat at the table. HR is a true business partner. And not a lot has changed in all that time. Although I do think the advent of technology and AI has shown that the relationship is super important. We are not just on a production line with widgets. So people work together in every industry. You need to have good relationships. Every statistic you read shows if a team feels supported and cared about as a person, that they do a better job. And you may have read some of the Gallup organization media around this and Marcus Buckingham on what makes a great team. And Gallup, famous for all their surveys, took many surveys of the Fortune 500 to see what differentiates them, not just financially, but what was interesting was the most successful of the Fortune 500 financially have good relationships at work. And they feel that their boss supports them. They feel that their boss cares about them as a person. These were questions asked, and those were the differentiators. And so what I have found in my long HR career It does not matter what industry you're in, what work you're doing, what personality style. You mentioned you're more of an introvert, but I have found that whether you're introverted or extroverted, analytical or expressive, everybody wants to be told thank you and feel
Hmm.
like they make a difference at work, they're valued. And even if they're not doing well, then that you're taking an interest in coaching them up.
That
And
sounds
of
so
course,
simple, but it's profound. This
yes,
is a profound concept.
it really is. And of course, there's circumstances where someone's in the wrong job and maybe needs to leave. But the bulk of that, the old adage of hire for attitude, train for aptitude,
Hmm.
that is completely true in my experience. That if someone is teachable and enthusiastic, I would rather train them up, which, yes, takes work, and have that rather than on paper, they look to have all the right credentials. And the thing that goes with that is you can't hire everybody that looks just like yourself in style or personality. They might be easier to manage. If someone has the same personality I do, it's easier to manage because we communicate the same way. We
Hmm.
get each other immediately. You can feel that, right? But what I found is if I can cover my blind spots with someone who has things I don't, as long as we have that feeling of team and trust and we have each other's backs, I look for people that have more analytical bone than I do to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And I have the big picture, what's going to happen around the corner piece. Some of the best working relationships I've had have been with team members like that have the opposite of what I do.
I don't want to like dive into DEI on our meeting, but I have seen you hire people who are not similar to you at all, but they have a lot of the same underlying philosophical values, right? But they might come at things completely differently, which I think is really cool because a lot of people take it too far. When they want to cover a blind spot, they hire somebody totally different, which might include different fundamental values. So instead of being a client centric person, they're an employee centric person, right? Or they are, a me centric person. And, that matters, right? And
Yes.
I've also seen you surveying the human capital and potential acquisitions. How much time are you going and looking at all those qualitative aspects of the workforce versus the quantifiable labor numbers and productivity equations that are all super tangible and right here on this Excel sheet?
Oh my gosh, Ryan. Okay. Very deep question. I
I
think
know, I'm
many
sorry
layers.
about that.
No, I love this. Now we're getting down to it. So, question one, yes, I don't think I maybe started out intentionally building teams with finding people with similar values, but that is what occurs. And whether your DEI is something visible and knowable or not, it is important to me, both DEI in life experience, culture,
Yeah.
everything, but in personality style, like I said earlier, makes a stronger team. It absolutely does. Because when you think, if you have done any of the style assessments like Myers-Briggs, DISC, Personalysis, they're all based on the same concept of a 4-quadrant personality style. And so if I'm one of those personality styles, that means 75% of the world is something else.
Hmm.
And so I need people on my team to help me speak to the rest of the world. And the values you have, the organization I'm in now, I really believe in their values. And I often say to candidates I'm interviewing, I have no idea the people down the hall that I work with. I don't know their politics or religion, but I do know we all believe in the values that are that poster on the wall.
Hmm.
And pretty much every organization I've been in has had mission, vision, values, and to varying degrees has lived them. In healthcare and in my organization, we really use it day to day. Start with a reflection on the values in meetings, make decisions on really tough, if we have to scale back decisions, using it, treating people well. And I think when you hire people where your values are aligned, and that's what we do, we want people that have a mission and kind of that servant leadership heart. But then the styles and the way they come at it can be totally different, what you said at first. So that's your first portion of the question. The second portion, as soon as you said it, made me think, boy, we need to spend more time there. You're absolutely right. How much time do we spend on the analytics of finding that and devoting, resourcing it and cultivating it? And probably not enough, because if someone could figure out the formula to doing that easily, it'd be great. I think my first leader in healthcare about almost 20 years ago now said to me, Katy, I like your ideas because they're elegant in their simplicity. Tim Bricker, if you're out there, thank you for that comment.
Absolutely.
And,
That's awesome.
That's what I try to do is, boil down common sense strategies. But how would we go about finding that? And I do think there's a lot of good tools out there that are styles assessments that aren't so deep that you go, wow, that was a good 2 days I spent and I have a nice binder that's on my shelf now. But what do I really do with it? How do I put it in action? I've got one that I really like because it's a quick hit. You learn something so fast that you can do differently, not just to know about myself, but to meet you. It gives you certain little tricks and tips on what are the tells that Ryan has, and I can guess what his communication needs are and meet him in the middle with that. And so there's tools out there that can help with spending time that I think are great for your talent acquisition teams to kind of use and really dial in what's the team dynamic and what are the values that we need, not just the resume on technical skills. And we probably could spend more time on that. I try to do that ad hoc in the areas I have responsibility for. But boy, if an organization as a whole could really dive deep in that, I bet it would make really strong teams. That's the differentiator right there, is people that work well together. And it's so hard to quantify and make tangible.
That's where I make my money, finding people like you often
You do.
for M&A, right? Like if a PE firm is buying another entity and absorbing that into the organization, I mean, or they're merging a series of entities in a roll-up into a new, larger organization under a centralized leadership team. I'm not aware of any magic formula or even companies that can go in and do it well, actually assess the state of the organization and the culture and define the framework and identify fractures and possible problems. The best thing you can do is hire a killer HR executive who does this every day, who's battle tested and pressure tested in public traded companies, not for profits, private equity. And it's just what they do. They go through those 4 stages of growth. They're at the stage of unconscious competence, which means I show up, I do work, this is what I do, and I don't have to think about it. I think the other people in the other 3 stages, which are unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, and then conscious competence, they still aren't there. They need people like you, because I've seen you do this over and over. But I was just curious if you had a silver bullet that we could share with everyone.
I don't. And maybe that's my retirement job because it's a great idea. And I'll give it back to you because this isn't an advertisement for Ryan Scott and Stark Lane, but for years now, I think we met about 20 years ago, maybe a little more. When I have utilized your services, And the reason that you've been so successful for me, I would describe it to other people that I've referred to you as Ryan having that boutique firm type mentality that gets to know the style and the fit of what you're looking for. And you just don't get that with some of the larger firms. And that's, of course, anybody listening knows when you get the right style match, it sticks, it works well, and turnover, like they used to say years ago, costs you for a leader position like 3 times their annual salary to get to the point of upskilling and training someone. And everything I've read in the last 10 years or so has been more like 7 times your annual salary because of the fast pace that we're in, the technology to learn, and everybody's doing more with less. It is not like it used to be in my organizations 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Everybody runs tighter. So what are the differentiators? How do you make that up? And it's still through people. So I think when I said, 20, 30 years ago, HR and going on the SHRM website looked like, oh, please let us sit at the table. Let us not be just the party planners or the police. And I do think there's a turn that I've seen post-COVID on executives, board members, organizations seeing we have to differentiate with what we offer people. And one thing that's a big positive probably about Gen Z is they don't wait around for it. Like maybe you or I thought we had to pay our dues, work our way up, slog away, not be treated very well. Gen Z does not do that. If they don't find meaning and purpose in their role, they will go get it quickly elsewhere.
That is an excellent point. And I haven't thought of it in that framework, but you're absolutely right about Gen Z, which is a substantial portion of the workforce now.
Absolutely. Isn't this the first period in history where we've had like 5 or so generations working together, and the boomers are staying longer? We still have some, and all the way down to the Zoomers.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a podcast episode coming up with some about Gen Z stereotypes, Gen Z in the workforce, with a couple of very bright up and comers who will be joining us. And thank you, by the way, for filling out that survey. I saw that today.
Yes.
But going back to that cultural piece and where you are today and the influence that I think HR has had in a lot of organizations, especially post-COVID, is I'm seeing so many boards who, using your words, finally get it in terms of recruiting for culture, and the fact that, hey, all the managers in our organization are emulating the same behaviors as the CEO. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I'm having that conversation with a lot of people these days, which is pretty neat because in the past, it hasn't mattered. That's the CEO.
Yeah.
Now it's, hey, we need to, culture is key. Culture is key for everything we're doing, and we have to have the right culture if we're going to accomplish our mission.
It really is. And, everything old is new again. We have been saying a lot of these things for a long time, but I think when you're doing more with less, now it can't be ignored anymore. Mm-hmm. That when you have seen a poor culture fail, you know what you have to do. And if it wasn't just the right thing to do for human kindness, which I believe on a lot of these issues we talk about, it's proven, like I said, back to the Gallup organization studies on this. I love that Marcus Buckingham book, First Break All the Rules. And the second book was Next Discover Your Strengths. And it talks about this very thing. And that's like 20 years old, that study. So I think it can't be ignored. Every team I've been a part of in the last 25 years that was successful had a great culture. And the ones that didn't have a great culture, I've seen a couple go down the tubes completely that were 100-year-old institutions that were so
Mhm.
sad. So, and you can't be everything to everybody too. It's like, find your niche, do it the best, and differentiate yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, and it's funny for me that that goes back to, again, how I make my money. And I've been a proponent of recruiting for culture since the very beginning because I have to have somebody who's going to have staying power and somebody who can meet well with the team, offering realistic previews along the way, trying to scare people off. And, that culture is just, it's foundational at this point. If you don't have it, you don't have
Absolutely.
anything.
And of course, bad customer service experiences, people talk about way more than the good ones,
Hmm.
unfortunately. And I think to thank Nordstrom for my first 10 years of learning, probably more than I did in college, how to treat the customer, how to treat your employees and reward them and create that culture. I just saw recently online, just a couple of days ago, that the Nordstrom brothers that I used to work with back in the late 80s in California, opening up stores everywhere, they are taking the company back private again to maintain the quality and the service that they want to see with their 125 years that they've got under the belt so far. So I thought that was a great reflection of that's why they're still here.
Awesome. If somebody came in tomorrow and said, Katie, you're done in healthcare, you can never be in healthcare again, would you go back to retail?
Absolutely.
Really?
I
Cool.
think I would. Yeah, I love the fast pace in retail. It was fun.
It
And
moves
especially
fast.
if it was Nordstrom. You know what was cool though about healthcare? You think of it as being the same over time, and not a lot has changed there. Well, technology really has changed it there. And the first CEO that hired me into healthcare about 20 years ago was so progressive. They were interested in my Nordstrom background, which even then was quite a while back. And that's why it served me so well, because that CEO wanted the patient experience to be like a Four Seasons or a Nordstrom. That's what he said to me in the interview. And he really was working on that. We've got all these other institutes, the Institute for Health Improvement with the quadruple aim. I'm sure you've probably heard about that, on lowering cost, increasing quality, and doing the best you can for your patients and caregivers. At the same time, again, what's the differentiator and what's the feeling? It's all culture again that patients have going one place over another when they have choice. And just running on thin margins like that, especially in nonprofit, they still have to be profitable. You still have to buy
Hmm.
a $10 million linear accelerator in the cancer center. It's hard to say, Ryan. I would like to do so many different jobs and you only have one life, but the best thing about healthcare is helping the community. And that's what keeps me there right now. But the innovation in other industries is now, and with strong leaders like the one I described, bringing that where you can to something that you don't have a lot of money to throw at that feeling that a patient has. You have to hire right. Again, it comes down to how are they treated? And that is not something that you can prescribe. You have to look for that and cultivate it and support those caregivers that have probably the hardest job in the world. During COVID, just the respect I had for healthcare workers. And we paid the price of losing a lot of good people that were burned out on that work.
Yeah,
And they're the ones that make that difference in not just the quality of care, but how well you took care of someone's whole person.
absolutely. Kind of comparing and contrasting healthcare to other organizations these days, especially in the field of HR. One of the things that I've noticed is even though healthcare is a fairly sophisticated business. Per capita, you have a lot of degrees, a lot of graduate degrees, advanced degrees, and professional people, right? But do you see any fewer crazy shenanigan HR problems? Oh my God, Katie, handle this. We need to bury this before it hits the media, right? Do you see any less of that in healthcare than you did in other industries?
Boy, well, I probably do see less of it because we are so highly regulated more than any
Yeah.
other industry. And we have a lot of good controls in place that just can't have some things happen with HIPAA, with PHI, personal health information. Um, and again, then really vetting our hires and a lot of programs, licensure, certificates they need to go through. So that's pretty much drilled in. So we probably do have less. Um, so that's a good thing. You wouldn't be around long if you had a lot of those in healthcare.
Yeah. I've I've seen a few, and normally that creates the changeover of an entire executive team, and that's when I'm involved when we have those kinds of issues, and so I've seen my fair share, and we probably won't talk about that here. That'll be for the book whenever a lot of people are dead later on.
Yeah. Yes. But, interesting you say turnover because it's not just things like that. I've been reading a lot that do you know the average CEO in a healthcare system today is like 2.5 years or something along those lines?
We were just talking about that with Susan Bailey, who was on a few weeks ago. It's like 2.5 or 2.7 years is the average hospital CEO tenure. And it's so funny because these people work their whole career to get to this point and they think, I have arrived. They're not ready for the difficulty of that job and the 360-degree accountability every minute. I mean, it doesn't matter what market segment you're in, it's tough.
Well, so true. And I don't think that's on a on a generalization. I don't think that's job hopper mentality. I think that's truly burnout in some cases
Mm-hmm.
that you may say what you will about salaries that, in a nonprofit institution or public for their top paid people. But like you just said, 24/7, the pressure, you're caring for people. This is not selling sweaters. And it's a really tough job. I've had some senior executives say, Katie, you don't have these jobs for more than 3, 4 years and you need to move on for a mental break. And that's people doing those jobs right now. So, I mean, I have all the respect for the people that support the people that are the clinicians as well. But yeah, I never had that bone to be able to be a nurse or a physician or any of the many ancillary roles. And I really admire it because when you don't have that ability, you just look at people in amazement. First responders, EMTs, where would we be without that? So very critical to our community health, especially serving underserved population, making sure they get in and they get taken care of.
And
So for the nonprofit, yeah.
underserved in rural communities, the home health providers, that is just a thankless job. And I don't have that bone either. I went to college initially to be a physical therapist, and I was working as a physical therapy aide in this clinic. And, I would talk to Mr. Jones. Well, Mr. Jones, how are you feeling today? Well, everything sucks and I'm dying and I hate you. Well, like, okay, well, that's cool. I decided I was a much better bouncer at the nightclub, across from the university, and then ultimately ended up sending and receiving hot lead in the military, which was great. Good job. But no, I'm not cut out for that. So I do love serving those who are, as long as I don't have
Well,
to do it myself.
as always, thank you for your service. I know your history and that's important. Two things there. Would love to get involved more with hiring veterans. They're so trained up and they are so willing to help serve the community. So I would love to do that. And also something you mentioned with the underserved population, it does just concern me that certain cultures, and especially maybe right now, don't feel safe going to get healthcare, and it may
Yeah,
be language barriers or perceptions or other. And so what makes a difference? Once again, people that can reach out into the community that show a culture of caring are what makes that difference for safety, for everyone to feel like that is their hospital, that is their healthcare provider. And that's part of our role too, is to really make healthcare for all
absolutely.
affordable, available. And it does concern me about the underserved population feeling that way.
It is such a complex world. I mean, healthcare is what, 17% of GDP in the
Right.
US, and it's the people that have all the answers. You ask random Joe on the street, a lot of times they say, "Oh, we need to just do this." Well, no, it's not quite that simple.
It
But
is.
I think people in the front line, executives like you who can drive a culture, a culture to serve people, who can build an organization, a cohesive organization that adheres to a mission and a vision of accomplishing some of those things. It's extraordinary. So I'm grateful to see you in action. I feel, just to be able to witness that, I feel better because of it, and to be able to speak about it, it's a really cool thing.
Well, thank you so much. I just enjoy having contacts like you. Love to pick your brain on what you're seeing in the marketplace and how we can use that to really go after these people that are differentiators. It's just what makes the difference in the whole organization, having high quality care. And that goes for any other industry I've been in
Yeah.
as well. It doesn't matter if you're selling goods or services. You have to still have employees that care, even in this day of advancing technology. That is what makes you successful. It's not brain surgery. And if we can just boil it down again, elegant but simple, maybe not easy, but that's the secret sauce, I think.
Amen. And I had some Q&A teed up, but we answered some of that. And the lady in Austin who sent an HR question, if we said her name and where she lived, we could all find her on LinkedIn. So I'm not going to bring that one up because that's a question that we'll probably address offline. And I know that you squeezed me in before a meeting that's up in 8 minutes. So, Katy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. We'll be in touch on other fronts, I'm sure.
This has been the Stark Lane podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you find the programs to elevate your career and your passions. Now, get back to work.